What's good, family? I'm Nikisha Elise Williams, the host of Black and Published podcast, and the author of the novel, The Seven Daughters of Dupree. This historical fiction novel is about the secrets kept between mothers and daughters over the course of 7 generations, and is told backwards in time from 1995 to 1860. The Seven Daughters of Dupree was published January 27, 2026, and is available everywhere books are sold. So if you can, please consider getting a copy of The Seven Daughters of Dupree today.
This is the Mahogany Books Podcast Network.
It's still 1923, but you just have a little bit more room to not be, I am a respectable Black woman and I'm married to a respectable Black man and we're going to do respectable Black stuff here in Boston.
What's good? I'm Nikisha Elise Williams, and this is Black and Published, bringing you the journeys of writers, poets, playwrights, and storytellers of all kinds. We have a return guest to the podcast today. Ashton Lattimore is back with her second historical fiction novel, Runner. The novel explores Prohibition-era life on Martha's Vineyard and the burgeoning cultural force that became the Harlem Renaissance, between two women who will do anything to achieve their dreams, including risking their own lives.
Some of the more fun parts for me are the family drama. I love all that stuff. Lena is just acting crazy for a lot of the book, honestly.
And got kicked out of church. Could not show her face.
Got kicked out of church. She's flaunting the new man in front of the old man. Yes, I had a fantastic time writing this, but the research was really, really fun too. And I think some of those moments, including the one where she gets kicked out of church, are grounded in history.
In our conversation, Ashton discusses why she enjoys exploring the full tapestry of the Black experience through highlighting class differences. Plus, the role respectability plays in keeping the main characters tethered to what they don't want. And the space created in women's lives when a man is gone. That and more is next when Black and Published continues. Ashton, welcome back. We've got Runner, which is very much a Black people summertime novel set in Oak Bluffs, but historical. So what drew you to this time period and this setting?
Well, first, thanks for having me back. I'm so excited to be back in conversation with you. So what drew me to the setting was being there, actually. The book grew out of a trip that I took about 12 years ago now. It was summer 2014, and I was on the Vineyard with a friend and my husband, and we were at the Martha's Vineyard Museum, and that's where I learned that apparently the Vineyard was this sort of hub of Prohibition-era smuggling activity. And knowing what I knew as well about the historical Black community, in Oak Bluffs, both the people who lived there year-round and the wave of people who started coming to vacation there, around like the 30s and 40s, they just kind of came together in my head. And I said, this would make a fascinating story. And I actually wrote the first pages of Runner, I think it was probably in 2014 or 2015, before I ever had any notion that I was really going to be an author or write a book. It was just kind of like, oh, let me, try this out. I've got a story in my brain. And it was Lena and Walter, who had a different name at the time. But yeah, it's this moment where they find out their father's been lost in a shipwreck and, they're saying, what are we going to do? And she decides to take over. So that's just kind of been rattling around in my brain for a really long time, like even before I wrote my
I was like, this is before the show tunes and all
before everything. And then once I finished All We Were Promised, the idea just kind of came back to me, and then I picked it back up, and here we are.
So is there historical evidence that, or any well-known Black rum runners from the time? I think you mentioned one in the author's note at the end.
Yeah, there are some Black rum runners during this time period, a handful. What was interesting that I found was like in the main cities where Prohibition era, like smuggling activity is happening, it's mostly not a Black thing. Black folks were involved in other types of crime, and they were involved at sort of maybe a lower level. But the big time smugglers, like the people, like Al Capone and, Lucky Luciano, and, all those people whose names you probably know, there was no sort of similar Black like family who was doing this kind of work that we know of. But at the same time, on the Vineyard specifically, what we do know about Prohibition era smuggling in particular, it was all about boats. The reason why the Vineyard was what it was because there were so many people there who were fishermen, who had been whalers. They're just a bunch of people there who have boats, and it's very easy for them to get out on the water. So the way it kind of worked in my head was, well, like, wait a minute, if I know there were Black fishermen here, and there are all these Black communities here. I know they had the boats. I know they were here. So why would they be the only ones who were not participating in this smuggling activity? But yeah, it's crime. So it's often not like well historically documented because people were trying to keep it a secret. So the short answer is no, there is no actual person that this is based on from the Vineyard, but the historical possibility is there. And the story lives in the space of historical possibility, is what I'll say.
So with that historical possibility, you take it even further
Mm.
and make the rum runner a woman. Tell me
Mhm.
all about it. Why, how, why not? All the
Yeah.
things.
So there were actually some women rum runners in the United States, a handful in Florida who worked like out of the Bahamas, some of them. There were women who were involved in bootlegging, so they weren't necessarily going out into, the water to do the rum running, but they were like making stuff at home. So there actually were a fair number of women during the Prohibition era who were involved in the liquor trade. So once you kind of have that around, you can kind of assume, in any place where that's happening that there's going to be one or two women who are involved. And in this case, I just thought it would be interesting to show a young woman, a young Black woman who has watched her father kind of get away with murder across many areas of his life. He's a flawed man. He he's a rum runner. He's got some other stuff going on in his personal life that is perhaps not so great. And she just sees this man operating with impunity. And it's helpful. It's helpful to her family. It helps them kind of rise up in the world. And she kind of looks at what he's doing and says, well, why can't I do that? And the 1920s is also a moment when women are starting to think that way. Women have just gotten the vote. They're becoming, more, involved professionally. This is very much a moment where women are starting to see the possibilities for themselves. And at the same time, a lot of the possibility that exists in the world is vice. So what would it look like if a woman just looked at, these men, they're doing all this crime, they're rich, they're bringing all this money in, they're doing whatever they want, in their spare time, why can't I? Which I think is a sentiment many women across many planes of time have probably had. So it just was really fun to let a character explore the ups and, some of the downs of what happens if you get involved in the things these men were involved in.
So Lena is our main protagonist
Yes.
and the woman who takes the charge after her very flawed father dies,
Hmm.
allegedly. But she is not the only woman at the center of this story. There is Della, or Dee, as
Hmm.
she's known, and she arrives on the Vineyard with a mission that is foiled because of the same tragedy that Lena and her family are experiencing, which is the death of Lena and her family's father, their patriarch. Where did Dee's character come from?
So the history of Dee's character, I'll start there, is partially where the families who vacationed in the Vineyard came from. So the two main feeder cities, especially at the beginning of those early years when Black folks are starting to come to the Vineyards, are Boston and New York. And Boston was really first. And Boston actually has, more than people realize, a really deep, long history of a Black elite, Black upper middle class families who came up in that city. Many of them were descended from, early enslaved people, but Massachusetts abolished slavery pretty early. So there's just this long history of longstanding Black families in Boston, and they would end up vacationing places like the Vineyard. And the women in those families were women like Dee, who are highly educated, who are cultured. Dee is a pianist. She wants to play, jazz piano, but she's trained, classically and everything like that. They're heavily civically involved. There are a lot of women's clubs, Black women's clubs specifically, that existed in Boston at the time. So Dee was interesting because she kind of gave us a window into the world that a lot of the Oak Bluffs vacationers were coming from at that moment. So that's where she came from in terms of the history. Without giving too much away, because this is coming out on release day, there is a man in my family history who did some of the things that Earl did, who was flawed in many of the same ways. And there are people in the story like Dee who are a reflection of some of the flaws that this man had. So that piece of the story, what the connection is between Dee and Lena and Dee and the rest of the family, what brings her to the Vineyard, and that kind of shape of relationship and shape of family, that's from real life for me.
I want to take a step back from the plot because
Mm-hmm.
what I noticed is that you did this in All We Were Promised, where you really explored the differences in class levels between Black people, with the Black elite and then the middle class and then also the working class. And then it was in that particular novel, there was the enslaved class. And
Mm-hmm.
here you're doing the same thing again. What is it that you like about exploring class differences amongst Black people?
I find it so interesting because I get to walk in a couple of different spaces as I'm writing this story. Lena took me to the sea. She took me to, the beach, to like the working class, the restaurants, and Dee gets to take me to art galleries in Boston and these women's clubs, and both of them coming together, take us down to Harlem to see some of the more glamorous parts of that and some of the parts that are not so glamorous at all. And I think I just find it really interesting to be able to build a story where there's high and low, and also where you're taking people out of their comfort zone. I think this is something that I did a little bit in All We Were Promised, and there's a little bit of it here where you have someone from one social class and they're coming into the world of somebody who's in another, and they're kind of a fish out of water, and they're experiencing all of the emotions that come along with that, some of the envy that comes along with that, and some of the discomfort. And I think a lot of really interesting kind of character work lives in places like that, where someone is someplace that they're kind of uncomfortable, feeling out of place, but seeing something that they want and they desire, and trying to move between these two spaces. And I think there's some of that with Lena. But yeah, I think that's what draws me to it, just being able to walk in those different places, different settings, and experience what the characters are experiencing as they cross these boundaries. And I think some of it comes from my own life experience too. I grew up fairly middle class, and then I go to college and I discover there's a whole echelon of Black people I've never heard of who, have Jack and Jill, and they have all this other stuff. And I was like, wait, what's this? And it's just an introduction to worlds I certainly didn't know about. And I think, many readers might not have a glimpse into in their own lives, but just understanding not only that it exists today, but that it existed historically, because I think the lens that we often put on Black stories is one that's very much middle class and lower, but knowing that there was so much of this upper elite as well, it's worth kind of knowing and exploring the full tapestry of Black experience, I would say.
In addition to our two female protagonists, Lena and Dee, you have this merry band of men
Mm.
in the book. There is Lena's brother, Walter. There is her sometimes kind of boyfriend,
Mhm.
maybe not. What's that man name?
Sam.
Sam, because he pissed me off, so I forgot
Well,
about it. That man.
he's a good man, Savannah.
He is
Or is
not.
he?
Mm-mm. Nah, girl. And then it's the new boo that she finds when she gets into the city in Boston that's from the South and kind of hefty, kind of thick.
Mhm.
Yeah. So we got these two women and these three men
Mhm.
in this rum running business, but also exploring the dynamics between relationships. Like Walter is grieving in the bottle,
Mhm.
Lena is grieving on the boat. Della is keeping all kinds of secrets, including about her sexuality.
Mhm.
I hope that's not too much of a spoiler.
No, that's
And then, the other men, Sam is pining away, and the other man is like, I just got here. I'm
yep.
doing what I'm told.
Mhm. We like a man who does what he's told.
We do, we do, we do. We love an obedient king, okay?
Yes.
But in putting them all together, and they're all in their early 20s, you're showing also the different levels of like access to a future. And you did this in All We Were Promised, where they were on the precipice of adulthood or just very young adults entering
Mhm.
into the world, where they have these choices. What is it about that age, specifically late teens, early 20s, that I think fascinates you, especially in a historical sense,
Mhm.
to open the different worlds that you do to them?
Yeah, I think it's just a moment of such possibility, especially, your early 20s, your mid 20s. You're figuring out who you are. Maybe you're married, maybe you're not. You don't have children yet. So you're free to move throughout the world. And often that freedom is some of the ways you find yourself in trouble, right? Like if Lena was married to somebody and she had 5 kids, she probably would not be like, I'm going to, pick up my father's rum running business and go off on a whirlwind adventure. You still have that room to explore the world and explore who you are. And I think in those moments in a person's life when your relationships haven't been solidified yet, you're not married to anyone, you're not officially tied, you're in a kind of situationship that's been going on for however long. There's just so much that you get to decide in those moments. And I think a story where someone's really getting to decide, who am I? What kind of woman am I? What kind of man makes sense to have in my life? Does it make sense to have any man or any woman in my life? And how am I going to arrange my life to make sense? And how is this man going to fit into it or not fit into it, or thwart what I'm trying to do, or help what I'm trying to do? And what does that tell me about what I need out of a relationship? So I think exploring that through the different characters, because for Lena, she's got Sam on the one side who just, loves and adores her, but has very kind of fixed ideas about what she should be and what their relationship should look like. And then there's Jesse, who is new and a little dangerous, but is again an obedient king. Okay, Lena, you want to, you want to get out on the boat and act crazy and go get this stuff, like, fine, I'm going to ride with you. I'm going to try to help you keep calm, because you do seem to have a little bit of a hair trigger temper going on. But, like,
Pulling guns on folks.
Pulling guns on folks, like, but I'm with you. This is what we're going to do. You tell me what we're going to do and I'll do it. And, both kinds of men exist in the world, and, each one has merits and drawbacks, but just being able to, where Lena was in her life, to be betwixt and between and kind of explore, what does it look like if I go in this direction? What does it look like if I go in this direction? It's just kind of a fun place to, have a little love triangle.
I was here for it. And then talking about desexuality, you show another side. And I think everyone will recognize that, queer people have been here forever. They don't just show up in time periods. But I know Robert Jones Jr. talked about it when he was first conceiving of the prophets, is that in literature, you really don't see a queer person's presence in Black literature specifically until around the Harlem Renaissance, which is where your book is kind of set. And you're very intentional about Della's character, her relationships, and then how people are reacting to it around her. What was important to you about exploring that, particularly now?
It's partly what you said. You don't really see these characters showing up in Black literature up until, a certain time period. But queer folks have always existed. Queer Black women have always existed. And particularly in the Harlem Renaissance, in the world of the arts, queer Black women, queer Black men were some of the drivers of the culture. So just to even entertain the idea of being in that world and not having queer characters who are up at the forefront would have felt unnatural, I think, to me. And that having that piece of her identity, I think it opened up a little bit of different story space as well, because Lena has plenty of stuff going on with men, right? Like there's her brother, there's Jesse, there's Sam, there's her father, there's plenty of men over there. But what does it look like for women to be in relationship with one another in a historical moment like this? Because, you see Lena and Dee's friendship and, their relationship as it develops. But what does it mean for a woman to be building her life with another woman? And what would that push her to do in a moment like this? Because part of the reason that Dee is willing to join this crazy adventure is because she wants to get out of Boston and go to New York, where there's more space for her to be who she is. So I think having
her girlfriend.
With her girlfriend, with Hazel, and Hazel's someone else who's also part of that world of the arts, where you have not necessarily a safe space because it's still 1923, but you just have a little bit more room to not be, I am a respectable Black woman and I'm married to a respectable Black man and we're going to do respectable Black stuff here in Boston. And that is very much, I think, what it felt like for her. So having somebody where New York represents not an adventure, because I think for Lena, I just want to leave the Vineyard. I want to go to Boston. I want to go to New York. I want to be anywhere that's not here because I haven't experienced the world yet. I think for Dee, New York is something else. It's safety. It's possibility. She's not trying to escape something. She's running towards something, which I think is an important distinction, I think, between their two characters.
You talk a lot about possibility. What I also am picking up on, though, is you also said a desire, but then also ambition. They desire different things. Like Dee desires to go to New York for the safety of the community, of both the artists and the queer people, so that she can live her life freely, and that her and Hazel, they are both artists. Dee is a pianist, Hazel's a visual artist. They can make it, they hope, in that space. And so that is their ambition and the desire behind a lot of their behavior. For Lena, it's very practical. It's rooted in family, that, my daddy is dead and there's a notice on the door about the mortgage and the taxes. Where are we
Yes.
getting this money from, friend?
Mhm.
And so her motivation and her ambition is like to restore a sense of normality in the
Mhm.
midst of this great upheaval by the loss of her father and everything that wrought and everything else that it untangles in her life. And again, like with them being such young women and at a point where they can really choose what path they want to go on in their life, whether it's chasing a path of love or chasing a path of career or
Mhm.
both or
Yep. Mhm.
neither,
Mhm.
because all of those are options. Do you speak often to like younger girls or like grade school area, whatever, just about
Mhm.
those types of things? Because I really see it in both of these books.
It's interesting. I don't know that I have. I done, at least with All We Were Promised, some school visits. And I think but it's also, very different historical moment. But no, there aren't really many young women in my life. But what's interesting about that is I just turned 40, but I still feel like that. And I have a lot of those conversations still to this day with my friends, all of us who went to college together, because, yes, you're in your early 20s and there's still a world of possibility. But life goes on after that, and there's still so much room for change and deciding who you are and what your career is going to be and what you feel ambitious about. And then for me, I didn't start writing books until I was my mid 30s. So I think some of that idea of there's still so much life ahead of me still lives in me and lives in the women in my life, even though we are not as young as we used to be.
All right, so then let's talk about the older women in the book. Since we're
Oh,
here,
oh boy.
let's talk about these mothers and these aunties.
Uh-oh.
Because I can't say too much. I can't read like my favorite passages because it's doing too much. But there's legitimate beef
Yes.
between Lena's mother and Dee's mother,
Hmm.
and they are constantly trying to outdo each other, even though they don't really know each other.
Never met each other, never seen each other a day in their lives, but they are very much, I don't know if I would say two sides of the same coin. They're what is the right way?
Earl
There
had
is
a
a
type.
yes, yes, he did. He
Earl had a
did.
type. But with Lena's mother,
Mhm.
after her husband dies, she does like the stoic matriarch thing. Like she grieves a bit, but then
Mhm.
she's like, I don't have to have this house. I don't have to have this lifestyle.
Mhm.
They can take it, put it up for auction. I'm going back to work as a domestic, doing this here laundry with my
Mhm.
sisters.
Yep.
Why? Because she was so very matter of fact about it. Like, you know what? F it all.
Yep. I think, and this is something I have seen, and you hear older women talk about it, and I think there's actually stats on it that widows, after their husband has died, tend to be happier than at least than widowers do. It's different because often, especially in older times when there were basically no expectations on men to do anything, or, apart from be a paycheck, they're not contributing to your inner emotional life. They're not really contributing that much to the raising of the family. There's just this man in the house who expects you to kind of like bend around his whims and offer him, whatever kind of service he's looking for, whether it's food or something else. And when that man is gone, it creates space. It creates space for you to figure out who you are and what you want to make of your life. And I think the part about her sisters that you brought up is so important because I think those relationships between other women, the women that you lean on, even if you're in a longer term marriage, those are often the relationships that many older women say sustain them and fill them up. And those are the people who genuinely take care of them in a way that often husbands or boyfriends or whoever do not. So I think her matter of factness was, as we've said, Earl was a flawed man and his flaws were painful to her. So, on some level, sure, she's sad, but is she grieving the loss of some great love? I don't think so. I think she is.
And I think a part of me thinks that she married Earl because she wanted a life like her mother.
Mm.
Because she like
Mm.
you talk about the space that's created when the men are gone, even if you're still
Yes.
married. And so like
Hmm.
Lena's mother grew up in a family where her father was a whaler.
Yep.
And so
Hmm.
he was often gone on the water doing the whale thing.
Hmm.
And so she got to grow up underfoot of her mother and with her sisters, but in a space where they weren't worried about that man until
Yep.
he came back. He sucked up all the energy and it was like,
Hmm.
everything's revolving around you now. We have to readjust ourselves to your presence.
Yep.
we can't wait till you go back out on the water. And so
Mm-hmm.
then she lives the same life with her own husband, who first starts with fishing and then goes into rum running. He's gone
Mm-hmm.
for these extended periods. So there's more space for them to create a family unit without him.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Create a family unit without him. They have their own rhythms. They have their own traditions. Her sisters are out there when she starts taking up the laundry. They're into it with her. They each take on their roles of what they're doing in any given moment. They have a natural rhythm, and this man's not part of it. So his absence is like, all right, he used to be away on rum running trips. He used to be away on fishing trips. He's away again. I guess he's never coming back, but okay. So it doesn't feel, I think, for her as different day to day as the way we think about marriage now. We're like, your husband's your best friend and all this other stuff. And, he's a daily presence in the lives of your children. But I think you're right. And this is not something I realized I was doing, but she was in a way recreating the conditions of her childhood by marrying this man who is out on the water the same way that her whaler father was. So, yeah.
For better or for worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ashton, can you read from the novel and then we can dig a little deeper into it?
Yes.
Runner by Ashton Lattimore tells the story of Lena and Dee, strangers who come together to take over Lena's father's rum smuggling business after he dies at sea, in an attempt to settle old debts and create a brand new life for themselves. Here's Ashton.
So I'm going to read the prologue, which is like a page and a half, so it's not too long. Okay. With the wooded mainland port towns at her back, the Sankaty steamed across the jewel-toned water of Vineyard Sound, bound for Oak Bluffs. Around the ferry, the sun reflected off the water, lending a shimmer to the shades of aquamarine and topaz that deepened to a sapphire blue in the distance. Dee Brooks staked out a spot on the uppermost deck, standing so far forward another step would have pitched her over the railing. She watched the pointed bow slice through tiny foam white-capped waves. Overhead, gulls followed the ship along, the wind drowning out their calls and whipping Dee's hair across her face. After 10 years away, she'd forgotten to bring a scarf, and with her hair loose, she delighted in the sensation of being neither tied down nor covered up. She shaded her face from the glare and squinted ahead, watching for Martha's Vineyard as it came into full view. The island was a wide expanse alive with green, gently sloped hills covered in forests of leafy oaks. The sand on the shores glowed gold, and around the edges of the harbor, rock walls stood guard. These were her beaches, her water, but was it still a homecoming if she was unexpected and, perhaps, unwelcome? Though Dee counted her time on the island in summers instead of years, the place belonged to her and she to it, at least more belonging than she'd ever found in Boston, where prying, judging eyes lurked around every street corner, and her mother's unmet expectations boxed her in so close she could scarcely breathe. The Vineyard was only 7 miles off the coast of Massachusetts, but the crossing felt like gliding into another world. Here there were only sleepy afternoons on the hammock of a cottage porch, toes in the sand, and laughter echoing off the rocks as children ran, splashed, and played. Up ahead, a stately hotel beckoned at the farthest edge of the harbor, surrounded by Victorian and Queen Anne-style homes embellished with pointed peaks and fussy lace-like trims. She couldn't see into the Highland Hills through the thicket of woods, but knew the cozy cottages that waited back there, making ready for the new arrivals. Somewhere among them stood the cottage her family had given up, now maybe empty, or maybe taken over by some new family, one whose secrets and selfish choices wouldn't steal the island away from their children. But she was a grown woman now, with choices of her own to make, and a man to hold to account. And she wouldn't leave the vineyard again until she'd got what she came for. With a nervous charge, Dee gathered her bags as the ferry eased into the terminal between wooden piers. To the west, the cottages of Ocean Park were a carnival of color. To the east, schooners and cutter rigs waited with their sails closed up, tall, sharp masts piercing the sky. She stared and wondered if his ship was among them.
Thank you. As you were reading, I was thinking about Dee's language and how she speaks in the book, and her being raised in this Black elite class in Boston, even though she's raised by a single mother, and that lends a notch of discredit to her name, but it's still very much within the respectability politics of then and now.
Yeah.
And that also plays into the classism. Why have between her and Lena be so starkly different and yet be able to bridge that gap so quickly?
The respectability politics almost makes it more important for Dee to be that much more well-spoken, to be that much more refined, because she is coming from a single mother. So the two of them kind of have to claw their way back to respectability from a deficit because of what their family structure looks like. So there's that much more pressure on Dee to be as perfect a representation of respectable Black womanhood as she can. Obviously, being queer, she's got a lot to cover up. She's got a lot to cover up. So she presents as very polished, very practiced in the way that she comes across because she's guarded. What you're seeing to some extent is a mask. But when she plays her music, I think she is very much herself. What she's bringing across through the way that she plays is, jazz is not necessarily thought of as like a refined, sophisticated music form at this time period. So I think there's some of that. But having Lena and her kind of come together and be able to bridge the gap, I think they see things in each other that they're interested in. Lena sees where Dee has come from. She sees Dee's access to the world, and she kind of wants a piece of it. She wants to know, what is this place that you come from that's not here, that's not this tiny island. And then I think in Lena, Dee sees a rootedness and a full family. Lena grew up with her father, her mother, her two twin younger siblings, with her big brother. And it just feels like a life that is bigger in the sense of family than what Dee had growing up. So I think they both see things in each other that they covet. And that's perhaps what attracts them to one another. Obviously, their relationship ebbs and flows over the course of the novel, and they have some moments of clash because they also see some things that they do not like in each other. Lena shares some of her father's flaws. She can be a challenging person. Neither Lena nor Dee is 100% honest with other people, with each other, with themselves all the time. And I think that causes some real harm and discord between the two of them. So I think there are some shared characteristics that both attract them to each other and that also kind of cause them to butt heads at different moments of the story.
But when they're lying to themselves, I don't even think they realize that they're not being honest with themselves.
No.
They don't have that self-awareness yet. Like when Dee is like, yo, you don't want Sam. And you acting like you don't want Jesse is a lie. Everybody is seeing you hanging on that man.
Yep. Everybody, including Sam, is seeing you.
Including the man you came with is seeing your behavior about this new man. Stop playing in our face.
Right. But yeah, they are not self-aware. They are not. I would say Lena in particular is extremely not self-aware about anything really that she's doing. She's highly organized and motivated and ambitious, but like the emotions and the things that she's doing, I don't know that she knows why she's doing them, right? She has
I counted it all to grief. Like,
yes,
Baby is going through it. She is not okay. Like
she's not okay.
Having all the stages, the anger, the acceptance, the resentment, the vengeance. Like she is not okay.
Yep. And she's gonna make everybody else not be okay either. We're all gonna not be okay together.
On a boat in the water. Sure.
Yep.
Yeah. Was this fun for you to write and to do the research for?
Yes. Yes, I'm sure that's coming across. Yes. I think honestly, some of the more fun parts for me are the family drama. I love all that stuff. Lena is just acting crazy for a lot of the book, honestly.
And got kicked out of church. Could not show her face.
Got kicked out of church. She's flaunting the new man in front of the old man. Yes, I had a fantastic time. Writing this, but the research was really, really fun too. And I think some of those moments, including the one where she gets kicked out of church, are grounded in history because there were women on the Vineyard who were very anti-liquor. The Women's Christian Temperance Union, that's a real organization that was like nationwide, and that was like a pro-prohibition, anti-alcohol organization. And in the research, I did research in the archives of the Martha's Vineyard Museum, and I got to go through the meeting minutes of the chapters of the different WCTU chapters that were on the island. There was one in Oak Bluffs, and they had a delegate from different churches around the island, including a delegate from Bradley Memorial, who was a Black woman. So there really were Black women who were like, no, we are not with all this, rum smuggling stuff. This is immoral. This is terrible. So there very much were women who would have kicked her out of church for doing exactly what she was doing. And that's kind of where I got the characters of her aunts from. But the research was just fascinating. And the Rum Row piece of it, where there are these boats just kind of docked in the middle of the night and people are running out to them. And, they have all these schemes to hide the liquor. It was just a good time. It was a good time. And I did lots of like archival research, but there was also some research that was just kind of understanding crime. And for things like that, there are books, but I also just watched Boardwalk Empire. Like, okay, what are the things that, what is going to go wrong, in a in a rum smuggling, empire? What are the things that people will do in these criminal situations? So it was a good time. It was a good time.
Rest in peace, Michael K. White.
Oh, yes.
And shout out to Jeffrey White.
Mm-hmm. Who
Yeah.
actually, he inspired one of the characters in this book. Jeffrey Wright's character, Dr. Narcisse from Boardwalk Empire, is the inspiration for Mr. Howard in this book.
Yes, I see it. I see it. Another complex male
Yes.
character that we have here. What did Lena and Dee teach you about yourself?
Oh, that is an interesting question. Lena, in particular, the balance between constantly being in motion and finding a place that is peaceful. Her home is something that's really complicated to her. She has a complicated relationship with the island because she wants to get off of it. She wants to get away from it, but she wants to save this house for her family. So I think she represents a really interesting kind of push and pull between like, I need to constantly be out doing something else. I need something new. And this idea of, that there's value in groundedness, I think is what it is. And I think through her story, I've also come to find a bit more value in groundedness than where she started out, certainly, and I think where I ended up as well.
What is it about historical fiction and writing stories about the possibility within the record that excites you?
I get to go on a journey as part of writing it. That's why I always loved reading historical fiction. What I always said was, I don't want to read something that could happen to me. So there was this one book where I read, I don't know, I was like maybe in college or something. And it was just like a very contemporary set book where like some woman is having relationship problems and she's like in a beach house. And I'm like, I don't need to read this. I can go do it. But but something that's like set way back in history gives me a chance to learn, but also it's an escape. I think it's a chance to step into different lives, step into different worlds, and grapple with completely different problems and different expectations. And the historical possibility piece is particularly interesting to me because we already know there are so many different moments and spaces in Black history that have been kind of erased from the record and are actively being erased from the record like right now that that we're seeing.
Literally right
So
now.
yeah, so the chance to kind of go back and rescue some of those stories from the dustbin of history and take them and make something fun and accessible for people to kind of go and live in them right now. Because, rum runners aside, there really were Black people on the Vineyard, in the 1920s who lived there year round. There really were Black vacationers who were there in the Vineyard at that time. This group of people really did exist in Boston. And, I think we know plenty about Black folks in the Harlem Renaissance. But those pieces of it, just taking these Black communities that people either have never heard of or even actively disbelieve that they could have existed and kind of lifting them up and saying, no, we've always been here and we've always contained multitudes. It's just something that really, really motivates me. And I love getting to be in the research that takes me into those worlds.
I remember in our last conversation and talking about All We Were Promised, and I asked you about how what you had written spoke to the moment. I think it was before the 2024 election. And so we were a little bit more hopeful.
Yep.
And perhaps we are now. But just about how you ended that novel with these three Black women, basically with the world at their feet and the opportunity and the possibility to change it. Now we have a novel that's in a different time period where it's more austere, more conservative, much like what we're living in now. Yeah. And yet these two Black women are there to show what is possible. Do you intentionally look for stories that speak to the present moment, or does it just kind of happen that way?
I think it kind of happens that way, but I think this story in particular, because I'm watching the change happen in real time while I'm writing it. This one in particular, because All We Were Promised, I was writing from like 2018 to like 2022. So a lot happened and it ended up kind of speaking to the moment just because, the long arc of time. But this one was written in a much more compressed time frame. So just thinking about particularly the way Lena's story unfolds and the way it concludes and this idea of like safety and community. And like there's this Black enclave that is special and worthwhile that's not really part of like the wider world or the wider white world. I think in a moment like this, kind of reclaiming stuff that's just ours, I think feels really important and really special because there's so much erasure and also just lack of safety. And it's interesting talking about like after the 2024 election when there's been sort of this collective step back, particularly by Black women, like, okay, y'all got it. Good
Let
luck.
It burn.
Right. And we're going to go and build what we want to build within our own communities and build the lives we want to build for ourselves. And there's so much of that in both Lena and Dee, because where Dee, where she wants to go is Harlem. She doesn't want to go, make it on Broadway or whatever. She wants to go be in a Black place with Black people and make Black music. And, for Lena, she's within this enclave of Oak Bluffs, and she's, with her family, and that there's some piece of her that, maybe can accept that that's enough. So this idea of stepping back into what is for us, I think, maybe not intentionally, but I can see how it was kind of coming through because of the time in which I was writing this, I think.
What do you want readers to take away from the novel?
A good time. That's mostly. I want people to have fun. I had an amazing time writing this, and I want people to just really enjoy the ride. I certainly want them to feel seen as well, especially the Black Vineyard community and that whole space. I think just feeling seen, I guess if you're part of it, feeling seen, but also if you're not part of it, knowing that this community exists and this history exists, and that this is a space that's still there for us. And it's a space that's valuable, that's fun, that's safe, and what you can kind of take from that. But yes, largely, I want people to have a good time. That's really that's what this book was for me. And, it's not necessarily a good time, like all happy times. It's drama.
Fun. It's
Yes.
fun. It is so much fun.
But yeah, that's what I want folks to take away.
Thank you. And so I have to ask the question, even though this is just out today, are you looking at other stories to rescue for the future?
I am looking at other stories. My main focus right now is Seneca Village in Central Park. That's where I hope to be headed next. We'll see what comes of it, but that's the next story that I really want to take and bring forward. I have a fascination with stories of the Black North. I think that's what seems to be kind of my theme. All we were promised is Philadelphia. This was like, Oak Bluffs, and, Central Park is New York. I grew up in the North. I'm like a grandchild of the Great Migration, but I've been up North my whole life. And I think I love the idea of bringing more stories of this part of the country to the forefront, more historical Black stories. There are lots of wonderful contemporary Black stories that are based in the North.
Big thank you to Ashton Lattimore for being here today on Black and Published. You can follow Ashton on the socials at Ashton Lattimore on Instagram and Threads. And make sure you check out Runner, out now from Ballantine Books. You can get a copy of the novel from Mahogany Books and get 10% off your first purchase using code BLACKPUB at checkout. That's BLKPUB. That's our show for the week. If you like this episode and want more Black and Published, head to our Instagram or our YouTube page. You can find them at Black and Published, and that's BLK and Published. There, I've posted a bonus clip from my interview with Ashton about the class wars on Martha's Vineyard that have been going on 100 years strong. Make sure you check it out and let me know what you think in the comments. I'll holler at y'all next week when our guest will be Rachel Housel Hall, author of the novel Mist and Malice.
I wanted to talk about small towns and how small towns are now becoming bigger towns through development. And in order for those towns to develop, you need labor and cheap labor. And that means an immigration class, an invisible class of people who work the construction, who have always worked our fields. And right now, those people are being targeted by unjust raids.
That's next week on Black and Published. I'll talk to you then. Peace.
What's going on, family? This is Derek Young
And Ramonda Young.
owners of both Mahogany Books and the Mahogany Books Podcast Network.
We really want to thank each and every one of you for listening to this episode. And if you enjoyed what you just heard, drop us a review and rate us on whatever platform you download podcasts on.
We truly appreciate each and every one of you for supporting us and making us your go-to for Black books. And we look forward to connecting with you all sometime in the future.
Thank you again, fam. And always remember, Black books matter.